The next step on this checklist is going to be step number 8. And this one is we're going to be doing is recording the flow rate of the glycol. To figure this out is to actually go into the control room inside the building and use the MRI controller. That should give you an output reading of the glycol flow rate. It's normally in GPM, but it can also be in liters per minute. Step number 9 on this checklist is to verify and document the discharge pressure of the pump. The pump gauge is going to be located just above the pump on this vertical line. Unfortunately, I already know that this gauge has failed and is no longer reading accurately. So what I'm going to do is document on this checklist that the gauge has failed. But you should be seeing anywhere between 75 psi plus or minus a few psi, or roughly 5.2 bar. Step number 10 on this checklist is to verify the amperage of the compressor. The best way to do this is to find the thermal overload and use the wires on the outlet of them to measure the amperage using a multimeter ohm meter. After you've verified all 3 legs of the pump, go ahead and document them there, and you should be seeing roughly 3.6 amps, plus or minus 10%. If you're seeing anything greater than that, please contact ACT and maybe we can do a little bit more troubleshooting. Step number 11 on this checklist is to verify that the cooling fan motor is clear of any debris and it's not making any loud noises. When the fan is running, you're going to want to put your hand behind here in this metal shroud here. The plastic fan is behind here that's cooling the motor. You should be able to put your hand back here and feel a good breeze going through. If it's been a long time, you're probably going to get a burst of air going through there with a whole bunch of dust the first time you touch it. Make sure that this is clear of any debris. Step number 12 on this checklist is to document the pump serial number. You can find this information located right at the top on this data plate. Step number 13 and step number 14 is to document the suction and discharge pressure of the refrigeration cycle. You can use any kind of standard refrigeration gauge set, and you're going to want to hook up your suction line to the suction line going into the compressor right here on the access port, and also the discharge line can go right to the access port on the liquid line receiver. Once the compressor's been running for roughly 1 minute, you can go ahead and document the suction and pressure and discharge pressure. They should be within a couple seconds of each other, so they have some correlation between the two. The next step is step number 15. Step number 15 on this checklist is to measure and document the supply temperature going into the condenser coil. The best way to do this is to use your thermocouple and go about 6 inches right square in the middle of the face of the coil. Give it about 1 minute and use an average temperature that you see. Step number 16 and 17 on this checklist is to document the supply and return temperature of the glycol from the MRI controller inside the building. Once you have this information, we can go ahead and move on to step number 18. Step number 18 is to take your thermocouple and put it into the center of the condenser coil. Give it about 1 or 2 minutes after the compressor's been running and document what the temperature is. Step number 19 on this checklist is going to be to document the amperage of the compressor. The best way to do this is the same as what we did with the pump. We're going to use the wires on the outlet of the thermal overload and document all the legs 1, 2, and 3. You should be reading roughly 8.7 amps plus or minus 10%. Step number 20 on this checklist is to monitor and document the sight glass of the refrigeration cycle. You're going to want to watch the sight glass for roughly 1 minute after this refrigeration cycle has started. Make sure that there's no bubbles at any time during that time frame. While you're watching it, you're going to want to make sure that the moisture indicator located in the center also matches the dry on the indicator dial on the outside. Once you verify that there is no bubbles in the sight glass, you can go ahead and take a picture of the sight glass before you move on. This picture is required to be submitted to ACT with your checklist. If you notice any kind of bubbles, please contact ACT immediately, as there is a chance that we're going to have to add some refrigerant to the system. Step number 21 on this checklist is to verify that you have proper superheat on the refrigeration cycle. The best way to do this, since we already have the suction and discharge gauges hooked up, is to also remove a little bit of the insulation on the suction line and get a physical temperature of the pipe. Once you got that, you can determine what the superheat is. Here at ACT, we like to see anywhere between 8 to 12 degrees of superheat, but we require that you adjust if you get anything 5 degrees or below or 15 degrees or above a superheat. If you have any need to make any adjustments, what you're going to want to do is remove this bottom cap on this TXV over here and turn it in or out depending on where you need to go. Once you've adjusted your superheat, make sure you document what the final results are on your superheat.